island to safety, and it appears that Noodle perished in the crash, and all that we see left is a used parachute. Everyone was devastated, that is, everyone except for Murdoch, who knew what was really going on. What really happened here was quite a surprising turn of events and tied all the way back to the very beginning of the band. What we saw was in fact part of a plan Murdoch put in action to get rid of Jimmy Manson, a 3-foot-tall hippie that auditioned years ago to be the guitarist for Gorillaz, but was turned down by Murdoch after Noodle took the job. Years later, Jimmy became the head of the Gorillaz music label stateside, but he has been harboring a grudge for years, planning to kill off the Gorillaz and cash in on their success. He approached Murdoch to help him put this plan into action, and Murdoch agreed. Murdoch was to secretly stash guns in the windmill tower, and Jimmy was to hide inside and wait until the helicopters started firing. As filming began and the helicopters fired, Jimmy realized that Murdoch had double-crossed him, locking him in the tower with no guns. Noodle did parachute off the island safely while the island crashed and exploded, killing Jimmy Manson in the process. When discussing the matter in the Gorillaz autobiography Rise of the Ogre, Murdoch had this to say on the matter: "There's no way I'm killing Noodle. She's Noodle. I'm not having some 2-bit loudly despot record company nut killing off my band." He set himself up and burned all the evidence in the process. Instant karma for Mr. Jimmy Manson. Though for now it still appears that Noodle is missing, and Tootie and Russell set off in search of her, and the band go their separate ways once more. Now on his own, Murdoch spent the next few years on a bender around the world until 2008. Running low on funds, he burned down the ruins of Kong Studios, cashed in on the insurance money, blamed the fire on some kids who were arrested, and fled the country. Oh, Murdoch. He also mentioned that part of his motivation to flee was him being pursued by a deadly underground network of pirates referred to as the Black Clouds, who are out to kill Murdoch after a failed business deal. He searched the world for a new hideout, discovering an island in the middle of the ocean made entirely out of landfill stuck together. He painted the island bright pink and used the insurance money to build a new Gorillaz HQ on top, naming the island Plastic Beach. Murdoch had the band's belongings shipped to the island and began production for the 3rd Gorillaz album. After Demon Days, 2D was said to be on vacation on a Jamaican beach, and according to text in G-Side, he was said to be completing a law degree. It's hard to say for sure, as we only first see him in an apartment in Beirut, where he is gassed and shipped to Plastic Beach in a suitcase. 2D believes that it was Murdoch that took him, and who could blame him? But it was actually a new villain, a demon wearing a gas mask that is the embodiment of all evil, the Boogeyman. The Boogeyman is seen prominently throughout Phase 3, but it does appear that the Boogeyman is working with Murdoch. For now, at least. More on him in a moment. Meanwhile, Noodle is still presumed dead, or is at least still missing, and according to Murdoch, he searched the El Mañana crash for her remains, only finding some bits of DNA. He used this DNA to construct a cyborg Noodle to act as guitarist on the album and his bodyguard. As for Russell, Murdoch did seek him out, but said he had essentially dropped off the face of the earth, and Murdoch was forced to build a drum machine from Russell's equipment to provide percussion for the album. Plastic Beach was released on March 3rd, 2010, featuring the singles Stylo, Superfast Jellyfish, On Melancholy Hill, and Rhinestone Eyes. So Noodle and Russell were not involved with the making of Plastic Beach, but we do discover their whereabouts over the Phases music video storyline. In 2010, Russell embarked on a journey to an unknown destination, which we find out is Plastic Beach, by diving off a dock and into the Pacific Ocean. The band's journey to Plastic Beach begins in the Stylo video, with Murdoch, 2D, and Cyborg Noodle driving a 1969 Camaro SS called Stylo. They have obviously been through some stuff already, as 2D is seen bruised, and Cyborg Noodle has a bullet hole in her head. They evade the police, and then Bruce Willis as a bounty hunter pursuing them in an El Camino on a stretch of highway in the California desert. There's also a large black cloud that appears overhead, and soon after the Boogeyman appears, manifesting from the ground surrounded by similar clouds, taking a police officer and disappearing. Bruce loses track of the three when they drive off the road into the Pacific Ocean, and as they descend into the water, Stylo transforms into a shark-like submarine. Then On Melancholy Hill, we have the return of Noodle 4 years after her disappearance. She is aboard an ocean liner, the M. Harriet, which is under attack by 2 planes, most likely the Black Clouds. Noodle retrieves a Thompson machine gun and fires on the planes, taking one out. But she doesn't have enough time to shoot the other, which drops a bomb on the ship. As the ship sinks, Noodle makes it to a lifeboat with only her guitar and some supplies. Meanwhile, Cyborg Noodle regains consciousness inside of the shark sub, and the trio continues towards Plastic Beach, now joined by the album's various collaborators in a fleet of underwater crafts. They rise to the surface where a large manatee is sitting atop a tall plateau. Murdoch spies the Boogeyman on top through his telescope and orders Cyborg Noodle to open fire. The Boogeyman retreats, grabbing the manatee and diving into the ocean. As the fog clears, Plastic Beach is revealed. They made it, but back to Noodle, who was floating aimlessly in her lifeboat. A gigantic version of Russell rises out of the water underneath her boat, ending up with her on top of his head. But how did Russell get so big? During his long swim across the ocean, Russell ingested so much pollution, trash, and toxic waste that it actually transformed him into a giant. And he is seriously huge. In the fall of 2010, Gorillaz embarked on their first world tour, but unfortunately Murdoch, 2D, and Cyborg Noodle spent the entire tour locked in the dressing room, while an imposter Gorillaz live band played in their place. Murdoch suspected that when he refused to give his soul to Satan for making Gorillaz successful, he made it so the live band would get all of Gorillaz' glory. And it is reneging on this same deal with Satan that causes the boogeyman to track down Murdoch to claim his soul, as we see throughout the phase. We would have seen this and the phase's story come to an epic climax in the Rhinestone Eyes video, but sadly it was cancelled. All that remains are storyboards, but we can still piece together what happened. It starts by showing us Russell and Noodle continuing their trek across the ocean. On the roof of Plastic Beach, the boogeyman is waiting. Murdoch and Cyborg Noodle join him, and Cyborg Noodle opens fire on the boogeyman. The boogeyman escapes again, and 2D sees him swim by from his underwater room. From his ship, the boogeyman summons the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse. Apparently, the boogeyman is a rejected 5th horseman who is called Flatulence. Noodle emerges outside just as the boogeyman summons pirates, who we have to conclude are the Black Cloud, led by the boogeyman. And considering he can turn into a black cloud, it seems to make the most sense. All hell breaks loose as the Black Cloud lead their final assault on Plastic Beach, and Murdoch hides inside, fearing for his life. Cyborg Noodle leads a retaliation with the collaborators, all now armed and ready for battle. Meanwhile, underwater, 2D watches as a giant whale makes its way towards his room. But just then, Giant Russell appears, grabbing the whale by its tail, hurling it into the air and taking out a Black Cloud plane. The video ends as Giant Russell leans over the side of the island. He opens his mouth, revealing the real Noodle inside, and we see under her cat mask she has a facial scar from the El Manana incident. Now from here there's a bit of a divergence between the end of Phase 3 and the beginning of Phase 4. Where things go back in 2011 doesn't quite add up chronologically to the members' new backstories recently revealed. So I will continue with the original timeline and explore the revised story in the Phase 4 section. Soon after the video ends, the Black Clouds bombarded the island, and in the chaos the whale breaks through 2D's wall and he is swallowed whole. While this was happening, Cyborg Noodle suffered a malfunction and tried to kill Murdoch, but she was put offline permanently by Noodle. Russell manages to rescue Noodle, and 2D escapes the whale. The boogeyman searched Plastic Beach for Murdoch, but Murdoch faked his death, leaving a shoddy fake Murdoch behind, and escaped, while the boogeyman collected the wrong soul. Shortly afterwards, the evangelist, the polar opposite of the boogeyman, appeared and wiped him out. Murdoch left in a rowboat, saying he was caught up in a typhoon, and landed in Hawaii, where he began to record a new radio show to celebrate Gorillaz' 10-year anniversary. But it turns out he wasn't in Hawaii at all, but in a ransacked house in London, and the other members were able to track him down. We don't know what happens when they reunite, but as of October 2011, the 4 members were living at 212 Wobble Street, London, seen in the Do Ya Thing video. And the boogeyman is still alive. He's now the band's roommate, apparently. This is the last we've seen of the boogeyman so far, and it's definitely a weird way for the story to play out. But considering several plots were more or less cancelled, this is probably all we will ever get. Russell, still huge, sleeps on the roof, and chained to the house, we see the damaged Windmill Island floating in the sky. There's also the stylo car out front crashed into a light post. 2D then receives a letter stating the band is being evicted from the residence, which he actually seems happy about. And this is the end of Phase 3, but what we learn about Phase 4 changes what happens during the attack on Plastic Beach, retconning the story from there. Now on to Phase 4. As the phase is only beginning, there is sure to be a lot more to come, especially with the TV series coming next year. But the story for Phase 4 began years ago back on the attack on Plastic Beach. Most of what we find out comes from each member's respective books that fill us in on what they've been up to. The Black Cloud laid waste to the island, and Murdoch escaped in a rusty submarine with Cyborg Noodle in tow for company, which Murdoch describes as the perfect shipmate for him, as she didn't speak, she didn't judge, and she had absolutely no sense of smell. Eventually, Murdoch drank all the cases of Psycho Jerry's rum on board, and he made it to the surface for a whiz. As he was emptying his dangerously enlarged bladder, a giant shadow loomed over him, the battleship Ringo, which is owned by music industry giant EMI and Gorillaz record label. EMI sent a fleet of ships in search of Murdoch, and at last they had him. He was captured, slapped around, and taken to a secret prison in London. For 3 years, Murdoch lived in Dungeon Abbey beneath Abbey Road Studios, until one day he was offered a deal by Entertainment Internal Affairs. theirs. With the music industry going down the toilet, they desperately needed Murdoch's help. In exchange for his release, Murdoch agreed to write a new Gorillaz album and moved immediately to a new studio home in West London. Next up, 2D. During the attack on Plastic Beach, he hid in his underwater room. Without realizing it, he put himself in danger of a far fiercer foe, Massive Dick, a great white whale. The beast swallowed 2D in one bite, swimming into the deep. But a lifetime of eating ocean garbage and now 2D took its toll on the whale, who died. His carcass washed up on a desert island where 2D was finally free. Too bad he has no survival skills whatsoever, so he has no option but to eat his former host. Several months later, 2D spotted a plane flying along the coast. Moved to tears by the sight of hope, he set off after the plane. A mere 23 minutes later, he was in the middle of a full-scale beach rave. It turns out 2D wasn't marooned at all, but he had in fact landed in Guadalupe off the Mexican coast. 2D joined the beach party, ate some strange tasting brownies, and came in third in the wet t-shirt contest. As he claimed his prize, 2D had a eureka moment. He would take a year to find himself, which was actually really easy as he was right there. But he stayed the whole year anyway until he got sacked from his job weaving friendship bracelets, and it was time to go home. At Heathrow Airport, a man at arrivals held up a sign saying "Wanker," which 2D of course knew was for him. The car took him back to West London and Murdoch's new HQ. Russell escaped from the pirate attack, cradling Noodle in his giant mouth and swimming away. They ran into trouble off the coast of Japan when Russell was mistaken for a whale and harpooned. He managed to wriggle free, but Noodle was lost, swept away in the blood-red waters. Wounded and delirious, Russell struggled through the ocean humming "All by Myself" until he lost consciousness. Eventually, he drifted into the Yellow Sea, washing up on a North Korean beach. Giant Russell was taken by the North Korean leaders, where he was put on exhibition. The leader declared he had captured Pulgasari, the legendary North Korean Godzilla. Russell quickly became the country's biggest attraction, but in time, the country's meager food rations caused Russell to shrink back to normal size. Realizing he was just a man, the leader proclaimed that he had personally defeated Pulgasari, and Russell was released. He was sent back to England, where he wandered the streets of London until musician and Gorillaz collaborator Jeff Wooten let him crash on his futon. A few days later, Jeff got a call from Murdoch, and Russell immediately moved into Murdoch's new place. As for Noodle, she awoke days after the Plastic Beach attack in a Japanese fishing village. She'd been nursed back to health by an old pearl diver named Chiyoko, and to repay his kindness, she took a job as his apprentice. One day, while beneath the waves, Noodle opened a giant pearl shell, accidentally releasing an ancient hell demon called Mazu. Mazu is a shape-shifting devil of unimaginable evil that can take human form. Noodle set out to destroy it, and she spent years pursuing Mazu across Japan, finally tracking it down to Tokyo, where it had risen to the top of the criminal underworld. Noodle disguised herself as a geisha and infiltrated Mazu's headquarters, the Demon's Lodge. While Mazu was distracted by a heated bout of drink while you think, Noodle lopped its head off, ending its earthly existence. She escaped its sumo bodyguards, packing herself into a FedEx crate with dried fish, bottled water, and a copy of Moby Dick. Her package was addressed to Murdoch in London. The band finally had made it back together after all going through their separate trials after the Plastic Beach attack, and began to record the newest Gorillaz album, Humans. Humans was released on April 28, 2017, featuring the singles Hallelujah Money, Saturn's Bars, We Got the Power, Ascension, Andromeda, Let Me Out, and The Apprentice. Wow, that's a lot. Though we only see the Gorillaz story continue in the video for Saturn's Bars. The Bath! It features the band moving into Spirit House, what we assume is this phase's HQ. As the band make their way there, we see this creepy face in a window. Maybe this is the first appearance of this phase's villain, or just something to be creepy. The Spirit House is aptly named. Not only is it decrepit and spooky, but is haunted by some weird looking spirits. The band try to relax and each have strange encounters with the inhabitants of the house, most notably Murdoch, who goes on an interstellar psychedelic journey. The haunting comes to a climax and the spirits seem to vanish. The next morning, the band leaves the house for pancakes, and as they drive off, there's a suffocated highway scene overhead. There's also signs all over the place for new developments around the area. The city is swallowing everything around it. That's all we know so far about Phase 4's story, but this is only the beginning. The Gorillaz have had one interesting, complicated journey so far, and I'm excited to see what happens next. That'll do it for my breakdown of the Gorillaz backstory. Thank you so much for watching, guys. If you have any other videos you'd like to see me do, let me know down in the comments. Thanks for watching Found Flicks. See you next time. I'm off for a bath.
picture. 'Cause right now that's the ball where we be trained. And if you're coming back to find me, you better have good aim. Shoot it true, I need you in the picture, that's why I'm calling you. Calling you. I'm the lonely twin, the left hand. Reset myself and get back on track. I don't want this isolation. See the state of me now. Calling the hunter with the rifle. 'Cause right now that's the ball where we be chained. Shoot it true, I want you in the picture, that's why I'm calling you. Calling you. I'm the lonely twin, the left hand. Reset myself and get back on track. I don't want this isolation. See the state of me now. If I pick it up when I know that it's broken, do I put it back? Or do I hit out onto the lonesome trail and let you go? I'm a lonely twin, the left hand. I don't want this isolation. See the state of me now.
Oh no.
Not again.
Try the Pet Expert range from Resolve. Foam for dirt and hair. Spray for stains and odors. Pet mess solved. Clean and makeup with Resolve Pet Expert. And for all those steam users, try the new Resolve Ultra. 3 times concentrated formula. Available at Walmart.
strange? Are we just too far to be as one again? Are we obsidian? Is this how it ends? Yeah, your life will turn just like a straw, 'cause your daddy's vain and your mother won't, and your heart engages into heartless roads. Are we obsidian? Is this how it goes? When your private life is dreaming, and you will find the light you need. Slide the light off you, you may find some peace. All will come to view if you come with me. Are we just too far to be as one again? Are we obsidian? Is this how it ends? When your private life is dreaming, living the strong, and you will find the light you need. And when